morning, shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight with your award-winning host, Dale Davidson. Dale interviews fascinating guests from top-ranked celebrities to people just like you who have an important story to tell. For more than 15 years, Dale has broadcast every week from the fabulous Las Vegas Strip. He finds the people who really make Las Vegas a one-of-a-kind city and lets the world know just what's happening in this remarkable town. You'll discover why 50 million people visit the entertainment capital of the world every year. Stay tuned for another exciting episode of Las Vegas Tonight.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We bring you fascinating guests each and every week. We've outdone ourselves this time for sure. His name is Todd Fisher. He's a producer. He's a director. He is Debbie Reynolds' son. He's Carrie Fisher's brother. He's an incredible guy, and he lives in Las Vegas, and we love having him as a resident. Todd, thanks for coming on the show.
You know, for those of you who don't know, it's Princess Leia's brother. I mean, you mentioned Debbie Reynolds. My mother used to come on stage a lot of times, and she'd look out in the audience and see a lot of young people, and she'd say, "Oh, I see a lot of young faces. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Princess Leia's mother." And I always thought that was kind of, I think she underestimated really, how big of a well-known she really was. But I always think that that's a cute way to do it. So I'm Princess Leia's brother, or I'm Darth Vader's nephew. But as you well know, I'm pretty infamous for being on the Force side of things. I'm not a big fan of the dark side. I'm sort of a major opponent of the dark side.
Oh, I'm glad you're on the right side that way. And I can see just sneaking into the picture one of your droids. Tell us about your droids. You have a couple of droids
shot,
there.
John. So next, I like to say that I don't go anywhere without my droids. So being here today, I've got R2's with me, and I've got C-3PO with me. And of course, Yoda's not a droid, but Yoda is a really beautiful mixture of philosophies, and some of his philosophies are actually, part of my family's philosophies. When you hear Yoda say there's no can't, only do, that actually comes from my grandfather. Who
is that right? Is that true?
Yeah. So the true story of that is the story of my mother in Singing in the Rain almost not being able to finish, and Gene Kelly was really riding her very hard because she didn't know what she was doing. She was very green, and he didn't really want her. So she's under the piano crying, and her feet are literally bleeding from how hard she's working. And this face comes down and leans under the piano and looks at her and says, "What's up there, little girl?" And it was Fred Astaire.
Wow.
And my mother said to him, "Wow, I don't know if I can do this." And he said, "Come with me." And he took her to his private stage, and he showed her how difficult. So Pandro Bergman was who he worked with, and the two of them were working on a number for a movie that he was working on. And he showed my mother how difficult it even was for the great Fred Astaire. Now, he made it look like nothing when he did it on camera, but he worked for weeks in a private stage until everything was perfect. And I think it's a great piece of life lesson too, because that is truly what life is all about. This doesn't all get dropped in your lap. My mother could at that moment have said, "I can't do this."
Right.
But you see, she had been programmed by my grandfather, who earlier in her life had taught her that in our family, there is no word can't in our vocabulary.
Wow.
And my grandfather, when I was 7 years old, unbeknownst to me, had taught everybody this in our family. So when I was 7 years, so when I was 7, there was a white picket fence, very much like Tom Sawyer. And he was painting this picket fence in my grandfather's backyard. And I walked up on him. I was about 7. And I said, "Hey, this is really cool. Can I get in on this?" So he handed me a paintbrush and a bucket of paint. He said, "Yep." He said, "But hold up there. Before we start this, I just want you to know that if you start this with me, you're going to finish it." I looked down there.
There's
I was like,
no walking away.
No problem. There's nothing to it. 2 hours later, we're halfway down the fence, and I walked over to him and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And he goes, "You what?" I said, I can't do this anymore. And he grabbed my hand. He goes, looked me square in the eye. And he goes, there is no word in this family's vocabulary, can't. And it began.
Wow.
So my programming
Wow.
began. So when Yoda says there is no can't, only do, that's where that comes from.
And you told me before we rolled tape today that your nickname on the golf course over at Southern Highlands, where my son is one of the pros, is Yoda. So they say as you approach the first tee, here comes Yoda. And you know what? That's a good name to have.
And it's a compliment because, Yoda's a very positive character. He's, he's very influential. He's very inspiring is a good way to put it. And isn't that what we all need to be, especially in these times, is inspiring. By the way, your son is awesome. He is he's a blast to work with. He works very hard, but he's a true pro out there, and he makes it fun for all of us. I'm proud to be a longtime resident of Las Vegas, and as well as a member of Southern Highlands Country Club. But some people say to me, well, how long have you been in Las Vegas? And I say, well, my first trip here was in 1958 to the Tropicana Hotel. I have pictures of myself and my sister and I in the swimming pool at the Tropicana in 1958. So
and you were a little kid then.
I was just a few months old. They just put me in the water. You know how you do with kids, and you kind of go, I got it.
That's fantastic. So did you split your time, and did Debbie split her time between Hollywood and Las Vegas in those days?
We did. I mean, in the early days, as you know, my father also was a very, Eddie Fisher was my father.
Eddie Fisher, a famous singer.
He's no small change. I mean, it was a very famous guy. And in Vegas here, he performed here a lot.
Did he?
And I have a picture of Eddie Cantor, my mother, at the Tropicana also. So there's some history there. My dad opened the Tropicana showroom, in fact.
Really?
And my mother opened the DI showroom.
That's fantastic.
So there's a little bit of history. We consider ourselves, always did, like sort of, dual residents in not in the legal sense, but in the technical sense, because we spent half our time performing in Vegas and then half our time in Hollywood. But truthfully, my mother, if you'd asked her, would have always said that she preferred live performing over movies and other things, because she loved connecting with the audience. And if you ever saw her, which I know you did, she was just magnetic in an audience. And she would go in the audience as part of her act, and she would mix herself up with the people and sing to people and play and interact with people like nobody I've ever seen. I mean, nobody had her charisma like that. It was magical. It was what made her so approachable and lovable, was that she was so real. And there she was, right in your face, and talking amongst you. It was like, wow, look, she's willing to hang out with us. Because she was one of us. She was never trying to hold herself out as some superstar. She always acted like one of the people, which was. I
always heard that about her, that she was very down to earth. Yeah, yeah.
When you come from El Paso, Texas, which we all know is not the ideal place to be from, it's much more glamorous to say I'm from Vegas or I'm from Beverly Hills. To say you're from El Paso is kind of like, okay, that's nice. But at a young age, my grandfather brought my whole family out, kind of like the grapes of wrath, literally in the back of an old broken down truck, to continue his work for the Southern Pacific Railroad. It's just a fluke that she ever ended up being a star. Truthfully, she was.
How did that happen?
Well, she comes out with my grandfather at a pretty young age and starts going to school in Burbank, California. My grandfather continues to work for the Southern Pacific Railroad. This is the middle of the Depression and on. It's still not great times. Now you're in the middle of World War II, not a tough time, for the country.
Yes.
I think we don't know that meaning of the word hardly anymore. I mean, this pandemic has certainly defined difficulties for people like World War II. And so she was going to high school at John Burroughs High School in Burbank, and very talented in the band and acting. And, she was very involved, but never dreamed that she would ever be a star. She would go to the El Portal Theater in Burbank and pay her dime and go to see the movies and see the great stars of the silver screen, never dreaming she would be one day. And then Miss Burbank contest comes up in 1948, and she says, I'll go do that because they're giving away a free dress just for participating. Well, in our family, you have no money, right? So it's like anything free is like, I'll make a fool of myself for a few hours if I get a free dress. So she goes down to compete, and first prize of the Miss Burbank contest was also a screen test with Warner Brothers Studios. And
really?
So she sang a little Helen Kane song and comedy, and her bathing suit that she wore actually had a hole in the butt. I mean, like, that's how bad things were. I say bad.
My Lord.
Those aren't really, it was tough. Our family didn't have a lot of money. Anyway, she wins the contest, goes on to do the screen test with Danny Kaye, makes a few small films at Warner Brothers, gets picked up by MGM. The next thing you know, she's in Singing in the Rain. And by 19 years old, she's in the most influential musical of all time, Singing in the Rain, starring with Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor.
That's incredible.
And I just told that other story.
And it can happen, yeah. People tell these stories, but yeah, you can't imagine that they actually happen, and it happened to her.
Yeah, I hear, obviously a lot of people have asked me, like, well, how do I make it in show business and all those things? And
right.
My mother sang this song, and one of the lyrics was 1/3 talent, 2/3 luck. That's one of the lyrics. and that's believe that. That wasn't like, so it isn't just how talented you are. There's a bit of luck involved. It's also a bit of who you know, but there is something in the Yiddish word chutzpah.
Sure.
She had chutzpah. My mother wasn't afraid of anything, and she would get in the, just do anything. And that's part of what made her. And I think that teaching I told you about earlier, there is no word can't.
Sure.
It's an important little philosophy, because when you're faced with difficult times, why do you go on? Why do you fight to continue? And she was asked that question a million times in her life, because she obviously overcame great adversity. The humiliation when my father left my mother for Elizabeth Taylor was enormous. The publicity was off the charts, and it was very humiliating and in the public eye. It'd be one thing in private to have all that happen. It's another thing when your laundry is hanging out in the wind for the world to see.
That's the thing about being a movie star. You have no private life.
Yeah, and my mother was very, very adamant in life about that's what comes with the territory. If you want to be the movie star, this is what comes with it. You share yourself with your fans, or you should get into another line of work. I saw her say to some pretty famous people, well, if you really are not that into your public or so annoying to be bothered by these fans, you should get into another line of work. And they'd all be stunned. Like, what are you talking about? Well, it comes with the territory, you see. Without your fans, you're nobody.
That's realistic. That's very realistic.
True.
I read a great quote by your sister, who said when she was at home, before her mom stepped into the closet, she was mom. And she walked all the way through her closet and came out the other end, Debbie Reynolds. And I said, that's a great line. Speaking
Carrie,
of wardrobe, go ahead.
Oh yeah, let's look at that.
Let's talk a little bit about wardrobe. Yeah.
What do you got to show us, John? Oh, okay. So
look at that. Tell us about. I know your mom collected a lot of movie wardrobe, and you have some of it there. Tell us what you have.
Well, this is Carrie's first stage costume from Las Vegas here. So there she is with my mom wearing
that's
it.
great.
How close can you go, John? Pretty close.
There's
that very costume. And then here's a picture of her actually performing in it.
Okay.
Standing on the stage. And so I kept it because this was her first stage costume. She was here at the Desert Inn Hotel, and she and I were together on stage. And, she was panicking backstage with the curtain. We were between the fire curtain and the main house drape, and she was behind me. I was going to go out first. And I mean, she had a serious look of fear on her, and I wasn't sure she could even make it on stage. And then my mother called us out, and we went out. And as soon as the spotlight hit her, it just melted away, all the fear. And of course, the rest is history. But she was never quite as comfortable as my mother in live performing. Over my shoulder is a film called Give a Girl a Break. That's Gower Champion right over my head. And then my mother's costume. In fact, there's a picture of that floating around here somewhere too. But
that's
that
fantastic.
Yeah. So there, that was some of the stuff my mom kept. This costume over here, if you stay with me, John, this is my mother's.
Wow.
That's
beautiful.
That's a Bob Mackey costume. It's very, very heavy.
Oh, yeah.
And
sure. Yeah, he was a famous designer.
Yeah, so that is a, what is that? What am I seeing here? Anyway, I see what that is. Okay, so anyway, that costume is about 30 pounds of beads. It's spectacular. And she wore this in her last performance at the El Portal Theater.
Okay.
So Carrie and I were on stage with her, and she performed, and that was one of her. She loved the glamour of it, and didn't ever want to see that change. She could never relate to stars that would go out looking like I'm dressed now. You see,
but it might be the only chance they ever get to see Debbie Reynolds. So she was dressed to the nines.
She wanted it to mean something, to be a star. She was trained by the greatest studio system ever, which was the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studio system. And they trained her to be a star, to act like a star, to look like a star. She never, ever went out without looking glamorous on some level, even if it was the big sunglasses and the turban. She always had the star look about her. And Carrie and I were always sort of impressed by that, although Carrie certainly didn't dress like my mother. Carrie had a different take on it all. Later on in life, Carrie, of course, was more famous for being a writer and other things than she was anything else. Although she will never separate herself from being Princess Leia. You can never.
That's right.
And at first,
the very
that
first
bothered
one,
Carrie.
yeah.
Well, Carrie, initially, no actor wants to be typecast as something.
Sure.
However, later Carrie started to realize that Princess Leia is Carrie, and she's the one who gave and breathed life into her. Yeah, George created the character, but Carrie is what really brought that character to life. And the two of them were inseparable. And so the magic of Princess Leia was also the magic of Carrie. The things that made Carrie so inspirational to all of us was real. It was really who she was. Minus the laser guns and things. Can't have that.
That's okay. It's actually a good time to take a break. We've got to do a little bit of commerce, Todd, and we'll be back. We'll be back with Todd Fisher right after these messages. Hi, I'm Dale Davidson, host of Las Vegas Tonight. You know, radio has an enduring place in the heart of America. Sometimes it's music that can enliven your spirit or keep you company when you need some. More often for me, it's just been the right spoken word or two that can quiet my mind and soul. Radio brings me a reassuring word in the quiet of night or a welcoming voice early in the morning as I shake off the night's sleep and find my way into God's purpose for my day. And always, I find the best radio station is the one that brings me the best news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. My favorite radio station is KKVV in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's still right where it's been for years at 1060 on the AM dial, hovering over Sin City like a gospel airship, broadcasting the good news of the abounding love that Jesus Christ has for every single one of us. No matter who you are or where you live, you can receive God's Word via the KKVV Gospel Airship. Just go to kkvv.com and click on Listen Live. KKVV is using all the tools that God's provided them, like podcasting and video streaming and video on demand, to produce programs that lift up our fellow believers and save the lost. If you feel a calling to speak to others about Jesus Christ on your very own show, pick up the phone and call the station. They'll be happy to tell you how. Call KKVV today at 702-731-5588 or drop them an email at kkvvradio@hotmail.com. Please join me in becoming part of the KKVV family. You'll be glad you did. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We have Todd Fisher and another member of the family. His name is Dwight. Dwight Reynolds / Fisher. He's a dog. Tell us about your doggy.
Well, Dwight is the last of the Mohicans. He was actually bought by Carrie originally.
Oh, and, okay.
My mother confiscated him, like she has a tendency to do, because Carrie didn't take good care of her pets. In fact, my mother was more concerned about what was going to happen with Dwight than anything else in her entire estate. So it was very cute. And so, you know, Dwight's getting up there. He's probably 12, something like that. But, you know, he's in pretty good shape. So I think he's going to hang around a lot longer. And he is, you know, as most pets are, they give us a lot of great laughs. And he's no exception. He's quite the comedy show, I could tell you that.
Oh, they're
but
wonderful.
He was one of my mom's prized possessions in the end. That was what all the things that she collected in life, which we're about to talk about. Her dog was the most important possession other than her kids, you know, but I'm just saying, you know, this was big.
And some days it was the dog over the kids.
Yes. Well, the dog is, I forgot the name of the brand. It's a very famous sort of courtier or something. It means like cotton dog in French.
Oh, okay.
At any rate, he's fancy. And he used to sit on my mom's lap and on her pillow, on her head, you name it.
Oh, yeah. Dogs are so great. My wife says, the more I learn about people, the more I love my dogs.
Yeah, you know, I always think in the movies I can stand sometimes when certain people get eliminated. But,
yes,
you know, when somebody hurts a dog or an animal unjustifiably, it gets you going, doesn't it? You know, it's
yes.
Some people deserve to be hurt, and it seems in the movie there's a rule, unwritten rule, that basically you do certain things to justify it so the audience is okay if you eliminate this character.
Right.
And if you have a really bad character, then the audience applauds, you know, when the character is
they had it coming.
But pets never were. I mean, if you ever want to get somebody justify getting rid of a character, all you have to do is kick a dog or be mean to an animal, and then no problem getting rid of that character.
Oh, the letters will flow in. Oh my gosh, they'll be unhappy. They'll be so unhappy.
That's right. Well, you have to be good to your pets. Don't get them unless you're going to be really good to your pets, because they can't do it without you. My wife supports some very big animal charities in Vegas here. We have some really great animal charities. There's the McKee Ranch right down the street from us here, and that takes in all kinds of rescue animals. And each area in Vegas has its own. I don't know them all, obviously, but I encourage people to support their animal charities, because there are a lot of animals out there, especially in these difficult times, that need our help. Yes, I've rescued 2, and one's 15, like Dwight, and the other is 12. And they have their quirks. They had some baggage when I got them, but I'll tell you what. Don't we all? That's right. I love them to pieces. You know, they're just wonderful. Speaking of collecting, let's talk about your mom. She was really the only person, it seemed to me, in Hollywood who was collecting the wardrobe from famous movies. Other people didn't seem to care, and she had a lot of them. Tell us a little bit about how she got started and what you saw as she began and ran up her collection. Well, actually, most people don't know how she got started. She got started when she was actually doing a little film over at RKO Studios for Howard Hughes. It's a film called Slept Here. And she wanted to go to a party. And so, again, this is still before we had any money in the family. So she had worn this spectacular dress designed by a designer named Wolf. And he was a really tough, but really talented designer. And he did all the costumes for Susan Slept Here. So she went to Mr. Wolf and she said, Mr. Wolf, I have a party I'd like to go tonight. And, we're done with that scene that we just shot. I'd sure like to use that dress to go to the party. And he was like, little girl, these costumes are not for you to wear to little parties. These are costumes for the movies, and they're owned by the studio. The designs are owned by the studios. Don't touch.
Right.
So she was like, okay. So that night, she went right out, and she climbed over the little chain link wardrobe area, and she retrieved this very costume.
Okay,
right
I
here.
want to see this.
So she retrieved this little party dress.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful. I mean, it's a spectacular dress. Okay.
Oh yes,
So she,
no doubt.
So she retrieves this dress, and she takes it to the party. And the next day, early morning, she comes back in very early, and she climbs back over the chain link fence and hangs the dress back up, and that's it, right? Wrong.
No one was the wiser.
Well, so they actually were the wiser, and they caught her, and it went all the way up to Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes called in all the security people and Mr. Wolf. Everybody was like, exactly how is it that this little girl just waltzes in here, just takes what she wants, does what she wants, comes back, and nobody does anything.
Nobody knows
and of course,
about
everybody
it.
Yeah, everybody's like, well, Mr. Hughes, she's so cute, and she works for you, and I don't know, so everybody got in trouble. I always tell that was the first time my mother ever collected a costume, but that did sort of influence her. My mother knew that these costumes were important. Why were they important? They were important because these were the things that were on these people. Eventually, these are the costumes that from the scenes in the movies that we all came to idolize. This is the costume, for example, like we had Vivian Lee's costume where she proclaims that, by God, she will never go hungry again. I mean, it's the costume where the moment happens, where Clark Gable says, frankly, my dear, I don't give it. I mean, these are moments. Brando throws Trevor Howard off the pirate, off the bounty ship. I mean, it's a moment, and those moments mean something to all of us. We all have our favorite moments and our favorite films. And The Wizard of Oz, my mother's favorite thing she ever had was the slippers. We still kept those. She has a pair of slippers. It's like the slippers, there's no place like home.
Oh,
I mean, that moment, those words.
And the millions and millions of people who've seen that film, they surely know about the slippers.
I like to say that those moments are a piece of the fabric of our country. It's what we're made of. It's stories that we are made of. Today, there's a lot of things going on in the world that would cancel some of these films, some of these moments, which I don't feel is appropriate at all, given that some of them are just showing history.
Yes.
Do you think Gone with the Wind is a brilliant movie depicting a very difficult time in our history?
Yes,
I do.
Absolutely.
Do I believe that it's based in fact? I do.
Yes.
Do I believe that people should learn from it? I do. Do I believe we should erase it? I don't. Because it's important to learn from your history. The old saying, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yes, indeed.
If you don't teach how we got here, you just might have to pay for the same real estate twice. As Patton used to say. Patton famously said, I don't like to pay for the same real estate twice. He's referring, of course, to once you have figured something out, once you have paid the price to figure something out or to own something or to claim territory or to even gain knowledge and understanding. Once you have that understanding, you don't need to pay for it again. Don't you tell your children, don't fall in that hole I already did?
That's right. Yep. That's great.
So the point though is that those are the things, and she saw those moments in film, and she started to collect the moments, the important moments. Like she has the Maltese Falcon, and the Maltese Falcon is the Maltese. It's not like the most brilliant film noir ever. It's a great film. It's Bogart, of course, is great, and
sure,
it's a great Peter Lorre. It's one of those Sidney Greenstreet. It's a great mystery film. But the best thing about it is when he's holding the bird and the guy goes, what is that? And he goes, it's the stuff that dreams are made of.
Yes.
And that becomes words that are connected to an artifact from a film that will live on forever.
That's incredible.
And I think that's why she collected these important things. And she was alone initially. Everybody was like, Debbie, we have the movies, which we didn't, by the way. Back then, we weren't even preserving the films.
Wow.
So that was
incredible.
kind of annoying.
Yes.
So we eventually started to do a better job of preserving film. Why did we want to preserve the film? Why did we make it a part of the United States, archives to preserve film? If today we're making this argument that these films are racist or something else, why do we bother?
Yes.
Birth of a Nation, okay? D.W. Griffith's film, silent films. It's a frightening film, but it depicts a time in history that's important. It's just a piece of information. No one's condoning it, but it's important. And so the National Archives preserve these movies, and rightly so, we should. It's an incredible snapshot into how we got here. Incredible snapshot.
Yes.
I am the last person in our family to tell these stories.
Yes,
so I'm the storyteller. I did a TEDx talk on storytelling.
You did?
One of the greatest, I did. And one of the greatest storytellers of all time was Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
People came from far and wide to listen to him tell stories about how we got here, about what's important, about what our priorities should be. So the storytellers of old and of today are greatly cherished by society because they inspire us, they teach us, really important. And so you think about that history before there's movies and all the rest of it, there were live speakers.
Yes, and that's how it all was passed down. It was all oral history.
But today I can take my story and I can put it in a book and it can get printed. I could tell my story in a movie and it can be put on Netflix or on television or in the theaters. So there's lots of ways to communicate. You could do what we're doing and talk to the world through the internet. So there's amazing opportunities to communicate and tell stories today that weren't there before. But the storyteller is still most cherished because somebody has to do what we're doing.
Yes.
You can't just get up here and be boring or you're going to switch it off, right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
what it's all about. If you can't tell a story, then you're not going to laugh on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Why did the studios and the producers not think this was an important historical thing that she was collecting? Because they pretty much ignored her collection for a long time, didn't they?
So before any of this, right when MGM was going out of business, who was putting MGM out of business? Kirk Kerkorian. Why was he putting it out of business? He had a dream of a big lion on Las Vegas Boulevard.
Yes.
The fertilizer from the sale of the costumes and the sale of the film library to Ted Turner and the sale of the back lots and the real estate, it all went to become the Las Vegas MGM properties. Vegas, his dream was to do that. And why did that happen? Because he didn't know how to run a studio. That's the truth. And he had other guys that didn't do a great job. The Louis B. Mayers were gone.
Yes,
the Thalbergs
the first
were gone.
generation,
Yeah, those were the real visionaries and the guys that knew how to run the machine. And without them, you wouldn't have the stars that you had of yesterday. We don't have what we had yesterday. We have great filmmaking today in different categories, but it's different, a very different world. But they in those days, in the days of, well, I just mentioned even Howard Hughes being mad at my mother for taking the costume. They kept everything. They knew it was important back then.
Yes.
What happened, though, is that when the next generation of corporate raiders took over, they were going to sell it off and scatter it the four corners of the wind. That's when she panicked. My mother panicked and said, we must rescue this stuff and save the important films, save the important, and I say important, it's a broad conversation. My mother was saving things for everybody and every piece of desire in film, or everything that could be loved. She was trying to do it for all of us. She wasn't just thinking, what's my favorite movie? She was trying to say, what's everybody's favorite film? Because I want something for everybody. She was saving, second and third level characters. She was saving the Nicholas brothers, who are a lot of amazing dancers that influenced Fred Astaire and Michael Jackson and everybody else. She was saving people that nobody was saving. Nobody cared to save. Yes. Because she knew that it was important to somebody. When we did the museum here in Vegas, when my mother had the hotel back in the 90s, it was miraculous what happened. We only put about 10% of the collection on display. She had thousands of costumes. Right. And when we did, though, the magic was we ran the film clips and you saw the costume.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So, we would have Old Man River from the film Showboat. The song would be playing in the beautiful pictures. Jerome Kerm's a score is playing, and Old Man River's being sung, and then you see the costumes.
Oh,
I mean, people are crying.
Wow, sure.
from the two of those things combined.
It's touching
Not that
moments.
Everybody loved that movie, but there's a lot of people that love it. Music. What is so great about movies? A minute ago we were talking about storytelling. When storytelling was just storytelling, and then later storytelling combined music and other disciplines to be movies. Now you've got every discipline creating a story.
Yes.
It's when you bring the greatest artists of every section, you bring them together to make one piece of art. That's pretty amazing. And
the collaboration is just incredible.
It's staggering. And then when you get a great bunch of artists together, it's amazing to watch what happens. When you get a great director and a great producer and great actors and great stage technicians and great camera and lighting people, and you put all that together, it's magic. Movie magic.
Yes. And
so why would she want to preserve that? She had to preserve it. It was part of her love as a child. It was now part of her history, and it had to be preserved. And so, I'm left sitting amongst it, but you're right. Many did not see it. The people that came later, the corporate people later, they didn't see it. They didn't care.
Yeah.
I sat in a meeting with Kirk Kerkorian and Armageddon over at the MGM and listened to them basically say it was just a bunch of junk.
We don't need
this. Yeah. I sat at the Academy many times, Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and listened to them say, I don't get it. I don't see what the costumes have to do with anything.
Yeah.
And she would explain. She says, you see, these are the tangibles.
Yes.
These are the things that remain. This is the dress, this little waist. This is the dress that she wore in that movie. And people can see that, and they can relive that moment when you see the clip, especially.
We owe her such a debt of gratitude. Todd, we need to take another brief break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One is you have your own collection, and I want to talk about that. And also we'll talk about your faith a little bit. Todd Fisher is our very special guest on Las Vegas Tonight. We'll be back right after this.
I learned that hope's everything. Like when you're pushed in every way to the end of your rope and you discover you're really alone in this world, really you are, without hope, everything goes. So it was Friday the 30th of September, and I was sitting at my computer and this pain out of nowhere just turned on in my neck. Pretty soon I discovered that at 25 I was going to have open heart surgery. I put my iPod in, I crank it to 100%, and all I do is focus on my breathing. After about 15 minutes, my eyes are closed. These thoughts, you're not going to make it, you're going to die, give up, it's over. I was so weak and I was under attack. Start praying. And that's when everything turned around. This hope came back 100 times stronger, and I had this rock solid titanium promise from God, for God's sake. You're getting out of this. Like, there was not a shred of doubt. Like, I've never been so certain of anything in my life. Cut a long story short, within 4 days I was out of intensive care. My oxygen levels were 100%. I wasn't on a breathing mask. I was walking without a frame. Within 5-6 days I was out of the hospital. And I can literally trace it to that Wednesday when in my heart and my spirit something turned around, and then my body very quickly followed. When I lost my own hope, when I lost hope in everything else, the doctors, medicine, my body, the only thing that brought me back was my faith in God. So the faith then led to the hope, and once the hope came back, like I said, you can have hope in God, you can have faith in God, because He's God, man. He's a good God.
Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We have a very special guest with us, and I sure hope you watch the first two segments, because he's about to wrap up in our final one. His name is Todd Fisher. He's a producer. He's a director. He's from a famous Hollywood family, and he is guarding his mother's collection, probably the most extensive collection of artifacts from motion pictures that exists. Let's talk about the new people who came in, Todd, and bought MGM. You were telling the story about Kirk Kerkorian and his lack of interest. Tell us that story.
Well, the people that started the great studio system had long since gone away. The Louis B. Mayers, the Thalbergs,
right,
you name it, Samuel Goldwyn, all the great producers that started this industry. And
Harry Cohn, they all.
Thalberg, Cohen.
Yeah.
There were a lot of great guys that came in subsequently. I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of talent. It's just that the guys that were steering the ship and had the power to hold it all together could no longer do that. They were all variously stages laid off or eliminated. And then you had new people, corporate people come in, such as Kirk Kerkorian and others, who, looked at things differently. They were pencil pushers, accountants, and corporate structure people, like what happened to Vegas in many ways. I mean, it became very, very corporate. There was a time in Vegas where you had all this amazing magic in Vegas, and they didn't care if they lost money in the showroom or didn't charge for valet parking and on and on and on.
Right.
Because they knew they'd make the money in other places. So those types of people were also prevalent in the movie industry and decided to liquidate it for its parts and pieces. They were worth more disassembled than they were assembled, at least in their mind. And the idea of creating great art really didn't matter to them. They had other ideas and visions, and I'm not discounting it. It was their toy box, but it did damage irreparably. I remember sitting with Fred Astaire and listening to him explain how he didn't really know what he was going to do. And I'm like thinking to myself, what do you mean? He's like, well, I've been laid off with everybody else.
Lord.
And I'm like,
my Lord.
What
I didn't know that.
You have all these people under contract. Fred Astaire didn't care about making money in that. He was more interested in creating this art form and keeping that alive. And then when one day they just said, everybody's fired, we don't really care, he didn't know what to do with himself. Literally retired. You notice he didn't do anything ever again. He did, when years later, Jack Haley Jr. made That's Entertainment 1, 2, and 3. He was in those films, but they didn't. None of these people knew what to do with themselves. They just didn't know how to reinvent
incredible. That's incredible. Short-sighted is what that is. Oh yeah.
It's pathetic, is what it is, because it truly was a magical era. I mean, I'm blessed to have lived through it all and got to know a lot of these people. I personally knew many of the great names. There are very few people alive my age that could say I knew Charlie Chaplin or Harold Lloyd or something like that. And yet I can say
phenomenal.
Those things. So that's unusual, but those are the founders of our industry.
Yes, yes.
But her collection, she sold obviously a lot of it at an auction after she realized she was, not going to get this done. And it was really broke her heart to do it. But as I told her the night before the auction, she can dry her eyes with $100 bills when this is all over. And I mean, that sounds harsh, but it actually turned out to be true. And, it was good for her in her latter days to be able to have that lifestyle restored to her. It was not good to take the dream away from her. That was never a good or intended thing, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. 50 years of trying something, is a lot of years to be dedicated. And when you're facing your 80 years birthday and you still haven't got it done, there's a point where you have to say, okay, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Now the Academy has started to do it now. It looks like that we might be opening in September. I am involved with them. I decided. Oh, okay. So I'm loaning them some things, and I will continue to loan them things. They're actually dedicating some areas in the museum to my mother and honoring her, shall we say, gift, and dedication to the preservation of film and television history, primarily film. And so for that, I, have agreed to work with them, and I'm not going to hold a grudge because many before them were too stupid to recognize what is to me the obvious of how important this all is. But the new generation of people are starting to. Part of it's got to do with price, right? So when all of a sudden my mother sells the Marilyn Monroe subway dress for $6.2 million, oh my God. Now all of a sudden it's important because it costs $6.2 million.
It's valuable now. Yeah, it's valuable.
Yeah, but a year earlier nobody believed it was worth anything.
They could
little.
care.
So I mean, that kind of stupidity is always, long before us, there were other people that had to deal with the Philistines, and they've always been with us, these hypocrites, and they always will be with us, and it's our job to lean against them and to push the other way. It's what the fight is about. It's even what Lucas is talking about: the fight against good and evil, the fight against the dark and the light. It's always with us. And my mother was a great fighter against the dark side of things. And when people said this stuff wasn't important, she fought with everything she was worth to her last dollar. And you got to give her credit.
She went toward the force as well. Let's talk a little bit about your faith, if you don't mind. There are obviously millions of people watching, some of whom are tuned in because Todd Fisher is here, and we want people to know Todd Fisher, the Christian. Tell us how you came to Christ and what he has meant to you in your life.
Well, my mother, as far as I can have recollection, was always a Christian. She always had strong faith. She used to always talk about how her belief structure is what got her through difficult times. She continued to talk to God openly, like you would talk to a friend, or like Jimmy Stewart talked to Harvey. Some people might think, who are you talking to? And she didn't care. She was like, this is what it is. This is what gives me strength. And she handed that down indirectly to my sister and I. We were given opportunities to go to church early on in life, and I went to a church in Beverly Hills, and it put Carrie and I sound asleep. These are churches that were, locked into very boring teachings, and this is kind of what
old-fashioned,
old-time religion. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but when you start to allow religion to be the whole thing, that is missing the boat. Because what my mother taught me was that this personal relationship that you can have with your Creator is there for the taking. Now that is a novel concept. There is no religion in that. Religion is man's attempt to get to God. It is not anything more than that. It is like an attempt, but you don't have to attempt anything. You can just do it. It's there for the asking. I was turned off to God at a young age and didn't want anything to do with it because all I saw was television evangelists begging for money, and it just didn't look like it didn't look like much to me. It just looked like more show business, which is fine.
Yes.
But it wasn't for me. But one day I had an epiphany. I was sitting I found myself listening to a guy talk about this very subject, and he said, give it a try. Just simply, you may not believe in him, but he believes in you.
Yeah,
I thought,
that's
okay.
interesting. Yeah.
And he said, just if you don't believe any of this, I dare you to just say, show yourself to me. Yes, I want you to be part of my life. If there's a God, right? Don't you want him to be part of your life? And I was kind of like, well, yeah, I'd be kind of stupid if I didn't. And so, all right, so then go for it. Just ask him. And you know what? If he doesn't show himself to you, then I'm wrong. Well, so I did that, honestly. And when I did that, I got an honest response. I got something that you cannot discount, and you can't touch it either.
Yes.
So there's things in this world that are tangible, and there are things that are not, yet they're still very real. So what's something that's very invisible and yet very real? Well, one example would be gravity.
Sure.
It doesn't matter that you don't believe in it. It's still there.
It's
very
always
real,
there.
but very invisible. Oh,
yes.
So that is also very true of faith. It's very true of God. And there's a scripture that says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. So faith is a substance. Gravity is a substance. So it really doesn't matter if you believe in any of this stuff, because it's nonetheless very real. But anyway, I had an epiphany, and I literally felt the presence and the love of a father for the first time in my life. I had never known the love of a father. I knew the love of a mother beautifully.
Yes.
My mother was amazing mother. I can't compare her to everybody, but I can only tell you that everything you could ever want was certainly there and then some. But the love of a mother was there. But I never knew the love of a father until I knew the love of Christ for me. And it's something that has to happen for people on their own. You can't play religion with it. It's not a book learned thing. But nonetheless, it's truly a very real thing. But it's there for the asking. And I do encourage people that are, especially in these times, I don't know where I would be in these times without that gravity behind me.
How true is that, Todd? How true is that? Yeah.
When you get out of bed in the morning and you throw your feet down, you don't think, gee, what happens if there's no gravity? I might fly up to the ceiling and out into outer space. You don't even think about that. You take it for granted it's there. Well, that's how I feel about my belief system. And that was handed down to me largely through watching my mother live this beautiful life of charity and love. And she walked the walk. She didn't just talk. She never, in fact, preached, ever. She only lived her life through example and never forced anything on us. And that is the best way anything can be received. So people have to get to these places on their own. Nobody could force you to get to these places. These are things that are done in the privacy of one's heart.
That's a great explanation of the gospel, Todd, and we have an audience that now understands it, and you saved some souls here. I believe that.
There was one who came before me, long before me. There are the teachings of Christ, are amazing teachings. If you get past that step we've just discussed, looking at what Jesus said is really interesting. The things that he thought were important, those lessons are not wasted on us. If you look at the greatest of his teachings being the teachings of love and all of these concepts and forgiveness and no judging of other people, those teachings we need today very badly. Judge not
we do.
Unless you want to be judged. I have that message to throw back to Washington right now. Judge not, lest ye be judged. We need to get out of the judgment business and get into the loving business. What made this country great was the freedom to allow people to believe and be what they wanted to be. That is what made America great. That is what will make America great again.
Amen. Amen, Todd. I'm sorry to say that an hour has ripped by. I don't know how that happened because you are a fascinating guy. That's
I'm my
it.
mother's son. There's no stopping. I can barely say hello in an hour.
and I want to address that very point by saying, your mom's proud of you. We know she's in heaven. We know she's watching you, and you've really turned out great, Todd. And your mom and your sister are looking down now on you and saying, you know, Todd's really okay.
Yeah, that's funny you brought that up. Those were her last words to me. She was like, I hope you're going to be okay without me. And I said, don't worry, I'll be okay. I have you with me always.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet. Thank you so much, Todd Fisher. You've been a great guest, and you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come back on, please do. Maybe you want to come on and talk about the museum and what they're doing with your mother's memory, and show us a little bit about that. So anytime you want to come on, you're welcome on Las Vegas Tonight.
We'll do a part 2 and part 3 anytime.
Okay, great. God bless you, Todd. Take care.
Thank you.
And as I try to remember to say each and every episode, when it comes to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, please walk with Him. God bless you.
Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with your host, Dale Davidson. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of our show. We so appreciate your loyalty to our program. To keep Las Vegas Tonight on the air, please go to our website, vegassaints.org, and click the Donate button. To send a check or money order, please make it out to Dale Wynn Davidson Ministries and mail it to 9030 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To suggest a guest to appear on the show or any other suggestions or questions, write to Dale at dalewdavidson@yahoo.com or call him at 702-480-3989.
Shine, Las Vegas, shine.